Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to meet all of you and present this amazing seminar. So what we like to do at my family business is be out in the community because we know that not everybody is as proactive as the people in this group and might not have resources or know about what to do with hearing loss. So we try and be out there in the community, and we're the representative at health fairs throughout the years when we can be out there. And then in this time we're doing it digitally. So for me, it's been a family affair. My mother's a sign language interpreter who trains other interpreters. My father is an audiologist. My wife is a nurse at Children's Hospital LA, and my sister helped to found one of the HLAA chapters actually in Central California. So we're all kind of sort of doing similar things, but a lot to do with communication and helping people communicate better. So we're really happy to present a great speaker today. And for us, I just wanted to just show you who we were, and then I'll show you who the amazing speaker is. So I will share my screen. And so that's who I am, and that's my my wife and child on the right. And she's actually, it's been a year now, so she's quite a bit bigger than that picture. So this is just a little bit about who the presenter is and my little family business. So we try and sponsor community events like this, and we offer annual hearing screenings for people in the community, complimentary. And we also, have everything that anybody would need to hear better in this day and age. We don't do cochlear, but we could refer, but we have, digital and artificial intelligence hearing aids, which we've given talks about, and we can come to people's houses if they need to. But generally we're in these locations, and we're here to help the community and be your resource. So that's enough about us. And now we're on to the really exciting main event. We're so extremely flattered that the esteemed Dr. Nancy Ty-Murray is joining us for the keynote today. Nancy is an amazing speaker. She's given speeches and presentations all over the world, actually, and received the Doris May and Harvey Friedman Award for Aging and Research in 2011, along with many other accolades. I'm so excited for her to present today on modern ways to approach hearing health and auditory processing. So without further ado, I will pass the presentation along to Dr. Nancy Ty-Murray for the remainder of the program. And I really enjoy meeting everyone and appreciate everyone coming on a Saturday to talk about this. So welcome, Nancy.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you, Jared. I'm about to share my screen. I hope I live up to your introduction. Let me just start slideshow.
Dr. Murray, may I just interrupt for just a moment?
Sure can.
We have different ways that we could go about the Q&A. So I want to just point out to everybody, if you will have a question, if you want to put it in the reactions button, there will be a raise hand for questions. We'd like to keep the chat, not have the chat being used during the presentation. So if you'd like, you could do the raise hand, and after the presentation, ask questions. Is that okay with you to do it that way, or do you have a preference?
Absolutely. I'm very easy. So we can save the questions till the end unless you have a burning question, and then maybe raise your hand twice or just interrupt me. I'm just fine with that. I'm so delighted to be here on a Saturday, and I think this is, I have a formal presentation that I'm going to give you, but I'd also like to think of it as a conversation too. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Oops, why is this not? There we go. So Jared gave my introduction, but first let me give you a fair disclosure, and then I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. I'm a professor at Washington University School of Medicine, and I'm also, so this is fair disclosure, the CEO and founder of Clear, which is a parent company of Amplify. And I'm going to be talking about Amplify today, which is a digital therapeutic for managing hearing loss. And I'm also the principal investigator of a R01 grant that does all the research that goes into what I'm going to be talking about today. But I'll tell you just a little bit about how I got started in all this. I went to undergrad as a deaf education student. I was very interested in that. Pardon? Can you hear okay? Was very interested in hearing loss from a very early age. When I got into deaf education, I realized I really liked the science. So I went into audiology and started a research program and stuck with it, got my doctorate. My first job was at the very infancy of cochlear implants. So I was back there in the days when we were trying to get FDA approval, and all we could hope for was that if you got a cochlear implant, you could speech read a little bit better, and you might be aware if a fire truck was going by you, you could hear the siren. That's it. So I'm astounded today when I see somebody with a cochlear implant pick up a telephone and talk. You know, that's how far we've come in my adult lifetime, my professional adult lifetime. In fact, I saw someone get hooked up with their cochlear implant. They picked up the phone to call their spouse. I said, do you realize the miracle this is? That, you know, in just a few years, we've come so far. I was very interested in speech reading in the beginning, and that's why I realized what an awful thing these masks are for you all. You know, not only does it mute or distort the speech, but it prevents you from speech reading. And, you know, speech reading can almost double your ability to follow conversation if you're looking at the talker. So that's one thing that I study in my laboratory. I call it audiovisual speech perception. And I study how the brain combines what you see with what you hear. The other thing that I do in my laboratory, and I'm very interested in, is oral rehabilitation. So coming up with ways to help people with hearing loss manage their communication problems and exercise their residual hearing. So exercise the hearing that they have. And what I'm going to talk today about is Amplify, and I really focus on what people with hearing loss can hear and the proactive action they can take to manage their hearing loss. You know, it's very easy to slip into that area where you think hearing loss is a downer and all the things, all the problems it causes. And I always try to pull away from that and say, you know, what positive things can we do to take charge of our hearing loss and make the most of what we can do. And so that's what I'm all about, and that's what Amplify is all about. So with further ado, today I'm going to talk about some of the comorbidities of hearing loss. And I'm betting a lot of you are familiar with these, but I'm going to go over them because they're getting a lot of attention by the public, you know, and I get a lot of emails and questions from people who are just beginning to lose their hearing about why am I losing my hearing? What are some of the other problems associated with hearing loss? So I'll start by talking about that, and then we'll move on and talk about Amplify. Here we go. So here's what we'll cover today. I kind of covered it, but hearing related comorbidities. The latest thing in hearing healthcare is digital therapeutics, and I'll define what that is, and then I'll tell you about Amplify. Then we'll go into the benefits of auditory brain training. And finally, I'll give you an example of one of my research studies, just to give you a flavor of the kinds of science that's going on in regard to auditory training. All right, so let's start with the 3 pillars of hearing healthcare. So in an ideal world, and Jared would probably agree with me, you know, when you get hearing treatment, and the gold standard is you go through these 3 pillars. The first is diagnosis, so where someone will suspect a hearing loss and they get a formal diagnosis. The second pillar is a treatment. So you come to somebody like Jared and you get the best possible amplification from a professional who knows what he's doing, or his dad, it sounds like, is the audiologist. And then you receive any appropriate assistive device technology. And ideally, the third pillar is rehabilitation. And this is where somebody with hearing loss learns to manage the listening technology, engages in ongoing rehabilitation to manage listening challenges, and gets ongoing counseling. Oops. I've got a strip of all of you on the side of my screen. I'm trying to move you over so I can see what I'm talking about here. There we go. Okay, so here with hearing loss, of course, I'm going to move on to the comorbidities now. With hearing loss, as I'm sure every one of you knows, there's some direct challenges directly related with the hearing loss. And this, of course, is impaired sound detection. So simply knowing whether there's sound or not sound. Reduced speech discrimination. So yeah, you know somebody's talking, but you're having a hard time distinguishing what they say. And this is because so many words sound alike. So the word car and bar sound very similar. And that's why lip reading is so important. Car, bar. So you can tell the two words apart when you can see me, but you can't when you can't see me. Poor sound localization. So knowing, I'm sure some of you have a hard time knowing where the sound is coming from, particularly if you have kind of a lopsided hearing loss. So hearing's better on one side than the other. It's very hard to localize sound. Increased perceptual effort. So what I mean by that is exactly what the name implies. So at the end of the day, you may be exhausted. And the reason why is you expend so much cognitive energy just trying to recognize the words even before you start processing the meaning of what the words have to say. And so hearing loss requires increased perceptual effort. And finally, stinted conversations. And what I mean by that is sometimes especially if there's a lot of background noise, you may be confined to talking about simple subjects like the weather or something in the room, because if you go too far into the abstract, you'll have an increased likelihood of communication breakdowns. And so these are, many people with normal hearing are completely unaware of some of the challenges presented by hearing loss. And this is kind of a laundry list of those challenges. But hearing challenges don't stop at the ears. And this has become more and more evident to the general public. You'll see a lot of articles now related to what we call the comorbidities of hearing loss. For example, there was an article not last year, year before last, in the New York Times about hearing loss and cognitive decline. Hearing loss, you'll see a lot of articles in trade journals about hearing loss and loneliness sort of things. So here I've kind of categorized what the comorbidities that we know about our hearing loss. And I'll start by saying untreated hearing loss, unfortunately, I think that doesn't pertain to anybody watching this because you wouldn't be part of HLAA if you did have untreated hearing loss. But if someone has untreated hearing loss, their healthcare costs are 46% higher. So that just shows you, that number alone speaks to what happens when you don't treat hearing loss. But the comorbidities include social isolation and loneliness. So there's a reduced quality of life, increased communication difficulties. This is untreated hearing loss, poor emotional well-being and mental health. There's a higher risk of depression. There's an increased likelihood of falls. So with untreated hearing loss, there's a 1.4-fold increase of your odds of reporting a fall in just the previous year for every 10 dB of hearing loss. Hearing loss is highly correlated with cardiovascular disease. So with hearing loss, there's a higher likelihood of both cardiovascular disease and a risk of stroke. And finally, there's a strong correlation between having diabetes and having hearing loss. And not all of these are necessarily causal, but there's a lot of research trying to explore the exact relationship between the two. Now, the biggie that I haven't mentioned, but I'll cover in the next slide, is dementia. And the researchers, particularly at Johns Hopkins University, have shown that there is a tight linkage between untreated hearing loss and dementia. So it's the risk of dementia is 1.89 higher for mild hearing loss, 3 times higher for moderate hearing loss, and almost 5 times higher for severe hearing loss. And it's probably a complicated relationship, but here I think are some of the factors that contribute to this link between hearing loss and dementia. Number one is simple social isolation. So there's a tendency, if you have hearing loss, if someone has untreated hearing loss, for them to kind of begin to self-isolate. And once that happens, you begin to lose that mental stimulation that goes on with conversation. You know, that back and forth is oiling your brains. Conversation is a good thing. Number two, some of the regions in the auditory section of the brain, because they're not getting stimulation from hearing, they begin to, one of two things begins to happen. Either they just begin to shut down, and so parts of your brain become inactive, or they're co-opted by other parts of the brain. So there's some evidence that your visual system begins to take over parts of those auditory brain cells, and that causes overall declination. And finally, because that part of your brain, the auditory part of your brain, may not be getting stimulation, it might have a kind of a blanket effect on the whole brain. So the whole brain begins to become duller, for lack of a better word. So this is a great reason to be using amplification full time and to be exercising your listening skills. So let me move into, this is where digital therapeutics come in. And this is a completely new brand of oral rehabilitation for those with hearing loss. So this is, I call it the way of the future of hearing loss is here. Let me, for some reason, I just went backwards there. So first, what is a digital therapeutic? It's a software-based intervention for disease and/or disorder that is clinically validated to enact a positive outcome. It's often used in combination with a drug or a medical device. Okay, so hearing care is a Johnny-come-lately in terms of digital therapeutics. Digital therapeutics are commonplace in a lot of other areas of medical care and are just now becoming available for hearing health. So here are some of the existing ones. WellDoc has a therapeutic for diabetes. So this is a daily curriculum that you go through every day, along with insulin for diabetes, and you learn to manage your diabetic conditions. Propeller Health has one for asthma and COPD, and here a instructional daily curriculum, so is paired with a inhaler device. And then Omada has a very popular diabetes and hypertension one. Other ones include smoking cessation. So you might have a nicotine patch plus a daily motivation on your app that you go through to help you quit smoking. And in fact, that's been shown to be highly effective. They did a study with 188 participants, and something like 97% of them quit smoking for at least 7 days. So they can be highly effective. There's a digital therapeutic for managing ADHD, and this is where children play these games that kind of calm them down. And finally, FreeSpira has digital therapeutics for panic attacks and PTSD that's been used by a lot of veterans. So my point is, digital therapeutics are quite commonplace in lots of different areas of medicine, and we're just now beginning to develop them for people to manage their hearing challenges. So here comes Amplify, and it is the first ever digital therapeutic meant specifically for managing hearing challenges. And I'm going to walk you through and tell you exactly what I mean when I talk about a hearing health digital therapeutic. So here's the definition: a comprehensive, tech-enabled hearing health digital therapeutic designed to treat hearing loss and its downstream effects. And some of those downstream effects include balance challenges and tinnitus in particular. And social isolation is a big one that we really target. Okay, so we call it the Amplified Journey. It consists of 4 key components. First, a personal hearing health coach. So this is it's either an app that you access via your iPhone, your tablet, or your laptop computer. And you get a personal hearing health coach who provides counseling and encouragement and support. Interactive hearing health lessons. So every day you get a kind of lesson with tabs, and it's composed of little quizzes, information, challenges, that sort of thing. Very entertaining. It's graphically colorful. Then the centerpiece or the heart of this program are auditory brain training games. So these are games that exercise your auditory mental resources, such as auditory processing speed. So how quickly you can recognize words. Auditory working memory, so your ability to remember what you hear, and auditory processing working memory, which one am I? Attention, auditory attention. Talk about an auditory brain blip. Auditory attention, and that is your ability, when it's very noisy, to focus on one talker and pull that talker's voice out of the background noise. And finally, a hearing health community. So we have various online chat rooms. So we put communities is a better way to put it. They're not chat rooms. We create communities of our users such that the group in your community is both heterogeneous and homogeneous. So you have some things in common with some people and some people are different, and this stimulates discussion. And the hearing health coach also kind of throws out topics a couple times a week to stimulate discussion. So those are the 4 components: a coach, interactive hearing health lessons, auditory brain training games that you play that are, we say they're fun to play even if they weren't good for you. And then there's a community. So I'm going to walk through each one of these pieces a little bit more in depth. The hearing health coach, so all of our hearing health coaches have to go through the Amplify training program and be certified to support patients that have subscribed to us. They provide one-on-one support and encouragement to play the games and let people know how they're doing in the games. They track weekly progress to provide personalized assistance and guidance on how to improve and reach individual hearing goals. So one of the things we do during the curriculum is we say, why is it that you're doing this? What are your goals and how can we get you there? As a part of this one-on-one support, you can message your hearing health coach directly on the app, and you always get a response in 24 hours or less. And all of our hearing coaches are directly managed by a AUD audiologist. So the next piece is the daily curriculum. And this is 6 days a week. Participants receive motivational, educational, and interactive content via their mobile devices. And you're provided with tools that empower you to take charge. And here it goes back to that idea that I say, let's focus on what you can do and how you can take charge of your communication difficulties. And then quizzes to help enhance engagement and reinforce newly acquired hearing health knowledge. So here's some examples of weekly topics. Discover effective listening. So this presents listening strategies that enhance participants' ability to understand messages and remember what people say. How to engineer the listening environment so you maximally understand what's being said. Plan for reading lips. This is one of my favorite weeks, in part because that's my area of study. But in this the app, we actually incorporate a lip reading test and a speech reading test. So you can take this test like this and find out what kind of lip reader you are. Are you a good one or a so-so one? You can begin to understand how much that lip reading helps you supplement your residual hearing. So it's probably one of the favorite weeks of all of our participants is plans on reading lips. And then we also throw in some lip reading tips. And then managing communication breakdowns. So lots of tips for how you prevent communication breakdowns from happening, and then how to rectify them, get back on track. And believe it or not, there's a whole science behind this on how to minimize the effects of communication breakdowns on the ongoing conversation. So that's a week devoted to that. Another example is your communication partners. So understanding how hearing loss affects our communication partners and also how we can help them out. And then we have 7 other topics. So we have between 12 and 16 weeks of content and continually adding more. So that's the second component. And here's some screenshots just to give you an idea of what the daily tab looks like. So it's all professionally illustrated. We have a graphic designer who works for us. And the idea is that this isn't a drudgery for you to do, but it's actually just kind of something to sit down, have a cup of coffee, relax, and go through it, learn something, but kind of be entertained in the process. And so active listening, here's what we mean by active listening sort of thing. Progress reports. So if you look on the left of the screen, we'll give you progress reports on both how you're doing in the curriculum and how you're doing on the gameplay. Here's an example. One of our, put a really easy example here, but here's an example of a mini quiz. So to get the fireworks going, we'll start you with a mini quiz to remind you of what was covered yesterday. Speech reading is best described as those occasions when you listen to the talker, watch the talker, listen to and watch the talker. And so when these quizzes kind of review the content that you learned the day before, and importantly, these quizzes reinforce the learning. So this is actually a cognitive psychology learning strategy to have quizzes after you take in the knowledge, because that reinforces your memory of what you've learned. Okay, here is the centerpiece, auditory training. So these are video games that you play online that teach strong listening and cognitive skills through fun, interactive auditory training modules. And the gameplay develops the brain skills necessary to understand what's being said, no matter what it is. So no matter what you're listening to, you're always going to have to rely on auditory attention, auditory word memory, and auditory processing speed. I think I have a slide on this, but let me just say something about auditory processing speed. The average talker talks between about 150 to 200 words per minute. So that means what happens is sometimes you're just beginning to recognize the first few words, and meanwhile the talker is 150 words down the road. And that's why it's very important to learn to recognize words quickly. If you're talking from New York, if you're talking to someone from New York, you're probably going 250 words per minute. So that's why that's a very important skill to exercise and try to develop. The daily curriculum, so after you go through the curriculum, it will suggest that you play between 7 and 10 minutes of these games, and it will tell you what game to play. You earn coins by playing the games, and you kind of can have a little competition between people in your community, because a leaderboard shows who's ahead. And we found, believe it or not, we found this to be very motivating among participants to keep playing the games and earning their coins. And very soon we're going to incorporate into the curriculum ways to spend these coins. So various things you can buy with the coins. So here's an example of a game that I'll show you. This one's called Defendir. And it's get ready to pilot your spaceship through the orbit filled with words and sounds to help increase your auditory processing speed and phoneme discrimination. So the auditory skills trained include speech perception, so your ability to recognize words, noise tolerance, your ability, so many of the games are what we call adaptive. So as you get better and better at the games, the background noise, so we play background noise in some of the games, gets a little bit louder. And this is developing your auditory attention. Phoneme discrimination, so your ability to distinguish between words that sound alike, like as I mentioned earlier, care and bear and car and bar. And then word identification. So something we do, you may not realize this, but during everyday conversation, you hear the same 800 to 1,000 words over and over again. Words like table or chair or lamp. You hear these words over and over. So what our strategy is to teach you to recognize those 800 to 1,000 familiar words very easily, very quickly. So during everyday conversation, you'll catch those words quickly. And so it'll carry over to your, what we call discourse comprehension, your ability to understand and follow connected speech. More examples. So we have Pearl Crunch, which is you build a pearl necklace. Pokier, which is based on five card draw poker. Matchier, which is kind of like that old concentration card game you played as kids. And then Shakespeare, which is where you build little stories. And here's a screenshot of Defender. And what you do is you pilot the rock. You'll hear a word repeated over and over, and you pilot with your finger the rocket into the picture that matches the word you're hearing. And the closer you get, this background noise gets softer and softer. And that actually is scientifically based. They say if you can link a motoric action with a perceptual action, what that does is it creates dopamine in your brain. Dopamine is a pleasurable thing. If it's pleasurable, then you potentiate, I like that word, potentiate perceptual learning. And that's one reason why we make the games fun as well. So if you're having fun and it's pleasurable, then your brain is much more likely to learn as opposed to doing something dull or repetitive. And that's why we really emphasize the importance of gamification. Okay, now all the games have progress reports. So you can track how well you're doing. So are you getting better over time, or at the very least, I liken auditory training to going to the gym. So imagine at the gym, you start out, you're kind of flabby, you get better and better, and eventually you reach a plateau, which is fine, and you keep at it. If you stop, you'll still stay in shape for another few months, but then you'll begin to decline a little. So consider auditory training as going to the gym. You want to get your listening skills as good as they can be, and then you want to maintain them. Here is some of the metrics that we follow. We're actually in the simplifying the screen right now. So this is kind of what it looks like right now, but it's even simpler to understand how you're doing with your auditory training. And you can see how I'm doing today, how I compare to the last 30 days, how I compare to the last 120 days. Okay, so far that's the hearing coach, the games, and now the peer support community, which is the third of the four components of a digital hearing therapeutic. And this is shared experiences build community. That's kind of my fundamental thesis under this peer support community. As you all well know, being an HLAA is all about peer support communities, right? So this is kind of an online version of that. We share strategies for handling challenging listening situations. You can pose questions, discuss frustrations, and celebrate progress. And I think it's so important, as all of you know, because you're in this organization, that you have contact with other people who are experiencing similar successes and challenges. Even me, I've been in the hearing healthcare world for 35 years. I cannot and will not ever understand what it means to live moment to moment with hearing loss. You know, only other people who go through those challenges can. And that's why I think it's so important that we have communities where people can talk and empathize and exchange experiences, suggestions, and tactics, if you will. But this support community is kind of overseen by a hearing health coach. And this is to kind of ensure that conversations happen. So she throws out topics. We have topics that match the curriculum to kind of get discussion going, and ensures kind of a lively presence. So here's kind of what I just said. The purpose is to counteract social isolation. So listening challenges can be isolating. The Amplify community seeks to help participants identify with others by tearing down the walls of isolation and creating a place of understanding and acceptance. So here's an example of how the hearing coach might guide a group chat. So you only get one pair of ears, protect them. So we have a whole unit, a whole week devoted to how do I protect the hearing I do have? And we cover things like nutritional tips. There's a nutritional science behind hearing healthcare, yeah. And so we go through that. We talk about what kinds of noises to avoid, how do you avoid them, that sort of thing. All right, auditory training deep dive. So I've told you about the therapeutic. Now I'd like to tell you just a bit about some of the research. So I've been studying auditory training for many, many years, but most of the research that has gone into Amplify has been accomplished in my lab at WashU during the last 10 years under the auspices of an NIH government support. So what exactly does auditory brain training do? Well, they exercise, auditory brain training does not change your hearing status per se. So, you know, after 3 months of auditory training, if you get an audiogram, it will look just like it did when you started. So that's not the purpose of auditory training. Auditory training also won't bump your IQ up 10 points. You know, you're not going to have a higher IQ because you did this. What auditory brain training does is to kind of orchestrate your hearing and your brain skills so they work in tandem so you maximally recognize speech. And so that's why our metrics, how we say how you're doing, pertain to how well you recognize speech and how well you can recognize speech if there's background noise, which seems to be the big complaint of just about anybody with any degree of hearing loss. And a big complaint with anybody with normal hearing. So the auditory skills that we train, word discrimination, which I've mentioned, everyday familiar words. So those 800 to 1,000 words. Your listening oopsie, sorry about that. You know, a bad thing about talking with your hands is if you swipe the computer, there goes your slideshow. So let me go back here. Listening confidence. So we've actually demonstrated that people who engage in auditory training have a lot higher level of listening confidence than those who don't. And then, as I've already mentioned, those auditory cognitive skills of processing speed, word memory, and attention. So auditory processing speed is how long it takes for you to understand and react to something that someone says. And I kind of already have mentioned this, but let me just tell you again. Words come very quickly when someone is speaking. So as I mentioned, as I'm talking right now, I'm talking very slowly. And even so, I'm probably coming out with 120 to 150 words per minute. And most people don't talk as slowly as I do. So that's where you fall behind on the words being spoken. And so not only do your ears have, yeah.
I'm just wondering, Dr. Tymeri, could you speak a little bit, just a little bit slower?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, I would be.
Part of the processing for some of us, especially between reading and lip reading and hearing, is
And Nancy, your sound
Yeah.
the sound is also distorted. I'm not quite sure if you're wearing a separate microphone or not.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not, but I will speak slower. How does this sound about right now? Little bit better?
Yeah, 10, 20% slower would be fantastic. Thank you.
You got it. So ironically, you asked me that question at the very time that I'm saying people who talk too fast are very hard to follow. So, and this is because not only do your ears need to recognize the words, but your brain has to process the meaning of the words. And that's why it's important to develop this skill. So auditory memory, this is the ability to understand what someone says and store it for later recall. And so examples of this are recalling the details of a funny story or remembering spoken directions. And so why this is sometimes a problem when you have hearing loss is that your brain has to give so many resources to understanding what is being said that it doesn't have the resources to take that information and plug it into the memory banks. And that's why sometimes, you know, you might say, boy, I don't remember you saying that last week. And that's probably one of the reasons. So auditory memory entails paying attention, listening, and I put it in bold because listening is where you hit the roadblock, processing what you hear and making sense of it, storing the information in your memory banks, and then recalling. So if the listening step is difficult, then those subsequent steps, so processing, storing, recalling, are hampered. They don't operate as top-notch as they might have. And here's what I just said, but I'll repeat it. Why listening with hearing loss may detract from understanding. Your brain power goes to identifying each word, therefore not leaving intellectual resources available for processing meaning or for storing the information into memory. So a week later, someone might not remember the details of a conversation because the details never made it to the person's memory banks. So a subset of auditory memory is auditory working memory. And cognitive psychologists love to talk about auditory working memory. And here's the definition. It's a subset of auditory memory. It's the work that someone does as they listen in the moment. For example, to get to a punchline, the listener has to keep in mind the lead-in to the joke. So this is your ability to chunk information and remember the first part of my sentence or the first part of my talk to kind of put into context what I'm saying in the moment. And here's an example. So let's say somebody says, my daughter is flying in from Chicago tonight, so I have to run home and get the oven preheated because she's expecting her favorite meatloaf. Well, that's a whopping sentence. And if you're having to work very hard to process it, you might easily forget the beginning of the sentence by the time you got to the part about her favorite meatloaf. That's kind of what I just said here. Right, the next cognitive auditory skill that is important to exercise is auditory attention. And this is another term from cognitive psychology. The definition of auditory attention is as follows. It's a person's ability to focus on the speech of a single talker and to ignore other sounds and speech in the listening environment, especially when you're listening in a noisy room. So I imagine everybody watching this knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say noise, background noise can really hamper your ability to attend to the talker that you're listening to or that you want to listen to. So there are three processes involved in auditory attention. These include orientation to the talker, so orienting to whoever it is that's talking to you, sustaining your attention, so not being distracted by what's going on by other things in the room, sustained attention, and then selective attention, so blocking out everything going on behind you. So orientation to the talker, sustained attention, and selective attention. And those three things are what we train with the auditory training games. So why is auditory brain training helpful? And this is kind of what I said earlier, but let me just repeat it because I think it's very important and it might be easier to grasp since I've got it written down here. When someone incurs hearing loss, some brain cells dedicated to processing sound get co-opted by other parts of the brain. Other brain cells shut down and stop working. Over time, someone with a hearing loss has fewer cognitive resources for processing speech, and that's where auditory brain training comes in. Because the brain has neuroplasticity, it can reorganize. And here's the really good news is probably 10 or 20 years ago, we used to think only babies and children had neuroplasticity. We thought once you reached adulthood, your brain kind of stabilized and couldn't change. Well, that's nonsense. We've now discovered that if you reintroduce stimulation to a brain, no matter what the age, up to 80 years old, it can reorganize and change. So a brain has neuroplasticity to change in response to experience and stimulation. And this is all good news for, let's say you get a new hearing aid, you get a cochlear implant, you decide you want to start exercising your brain can change because of the stimulation you're providing to it. And so I mentioned earlier the importance of gamifying auditory training. You know, why is it, you may not know this, but we have spent lots of effort and time making these games fun to play and making them game-like. We have a professional computer game designer and we have a professional graphic designer. So why do we go to all this trouble? And by the way, very few people do go to all this trouble. The traditional auditory training was kind of rote and drill-like, but we gamified it. And here's the reason why. So playing video games is entertaining. So number one, if it's not fun to do, you won't do it. So it's got to be entertaining. But there's more to it than just keeping you interested and engaged. When you are being entertained, and here's what I mentioned before, but I want it down in writing. When you're entertaining, your brain releases a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And this neurotransmitter works as a messenger between brain cells. So it carries messages between the neurons in your brain. Gameplay causes more dopamine to be released, and more dopamine promotes brain plasticity. And finally, so this is kind of like a 1, 2, 3, 4 recipe. More brain plasticity means more auditory learning and more development of auditory brain regions. So you want to keep that auditory part of your brain. I keep going like this because it's about right here, the temporal lobe is where all that auditory processing happens, right around there and here. So auditory training has been backed by clinical research and peer-reviewed publishing. So here are some of the journals we have published in, and this is what our research has uncovered. auditory training enhances speech discrimination. So your ability to distinguish between one word versus another leads to reduced perceptual effort. So you remember I talked about that at the beginning, how listening with hearing loss requires a lot of effort. Well, because listening becomes easier, you're exerting less perceptual effort. It enhances the hearing wellness experience. So we have found that we actually just finished a study with 28 people with brand new hearing aids, and they all reported because of the program, they feel like they're better able to manage their hearing loss, and they adapted to their new hearing aids. 50% of them said that the program helped them acclimate to their new hearing aids and accelerated the process. And over 90% said they would recommend it to another friend. Increases listening confidence, leads to improved communication and interactions between couples. And here I say in progress, but we've actually just finished this study this month. It increases hearing aid use time, satisfaction, and acclimation. Okay, I'm about to the end of my hour, so I think I'm going to wrap up. I was going to go over an example of one of our research studies so you could get an idea of how we conduct the science, but I'd like to leave some time for questions and answers. So I'm going to leave it right here. And I would love to hear questions and comments and hear your ideas and thoughts. So let's see. Yes, Michelle. Asked to unmute.
Okay, I'm trying to, did I turn my video back on too? Trying to change my screen here.
Yeah, stop share. There we go.
Okay, hi. Thank you for this very, very informational presentation. I'm amazed how I learn about new technology every day, even when we think we know it all, right? Couple questions. Is this an app or a website program? And is there a cost? And how do I sign up? And is it tailorable that you can only join certain parts of it, or do you have to have it all? Like if I'm not really interested in the community part right away, can I just do the other stuff? So I guess, could you share a bit more on
Absolutely.
how can we do that?
Those are all great questions. So yes, you can sign up. You can sign up directly at www.amptify.com. And that was on my last slide, and I'll pull that back up. But Amptify is AMPTIFY. So www.amptify.com. You can have to do all 4 components because that's what makes a digital therapeutic, are those 4 components. So we actually started with just the auditory games back with a different product called Clear, and we found that we needed more, and we followed the model of those other digital therapeutics. So they must work in concert. A 3-month program is $150. So $50 a month. And the reason for that price tag is that our hearing health coaches are professionals. You know, you can't get that kind of day-to-day support from professionals free of charge. And that's as inexpensive as we can offer it.
Okay, are those like live coaches that you're able to talk
Yes.
to, or is that just they check on and they're in the background?
No, it's a live coach. You don't talk to them, you chat with them. And so they're real people. We have an in-house certification program. It's kind of based on ASHA's audiology assistant program. And I say kind of because if you look at audio, so that's the American Speech Hearing Association, you know, our professional group. ASHA has a certification program for audiology assistants, but most of that is based on diagnostics and hearing aids. We pretty much had to write the book on oral rehabilitation. Actually, I did write the book on oral rehabilitation. But we really train them on counseling. We train them on comorbidities such as managing tinnitus. That's a big question we get over and over. How do I manage my tinnitus? So that is, I say there are two secret sauces to Amplify. One is that we have this online support, and the other are these auditory games. But thank you for your
Okay.
question.
Yeah, is it also available, like, I'm assuming it's since it's like an app where you can just hook in on your cell phone.
Exactly. So
on your
just
computer.
you can just download it and play it. In fact, that's what most people do is play it on this.
Do you-
So the nice
Does it
thing
have,
is, pardon?
sorry.
Oh, you can play it on the, if you're on an airplane or you're in a waiting room, just.
Okay. Does it come along with while you're doing like the listening to sounds? I know a lot of it is games, but does it also have like the speech recognition software where you can read along as you're doing it? Because my interest is I have 2 cochlear implants. One was implanted many years ago and one more recently. And the more recent one I'm not as successful with. So I want to practice with the newer one. But if I take the older one, which is actually more successful off, I have a really hard time understanding. So I'm not sure I would even understand the directions as I'm going through trying to work on the second side if I don't have my first side on.
I hear you. So all of the curriculum and the directions are in writing. So you read those. The only thing you have to listen to are the games. And so as you play the games, and the games are adaptive. And what that means is the better you do, the harder they get. The worse you do, the easier they get. So someone like you, I would recommend that you start out playing with both of your implants until you get very successful, and then start taking the good one off and exercising the poor ear. It's probably, if I were your coach, that's probably what I would suggest for you.
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you.
And can you try and experiment with this, I guess, before you buy? Is there like a trial period available?
Not right now, there's not, but you can quit anytime.
Thank you, Michelle, for your question. I think Janie had a question as well. If you could unmute yourself.
Yes. Hi, thank you for sharing your information today. There was one slide you talked about the how falls are increased for every 10 dB of hearing loss. And I'm just puzzled by that. Can you explain falls and hearing loss?
Yeah. The short answer is no. We're still trying to understand that, but there's some evidence. First of all, the vestibular system, which is primarily in charge of balance. Your eyes play a part, your proprioception, your sense of feeling, like your feet on the ground, plays a part. But the vestibular system is your balance system, and that's housed in your ear. So it's right next door. You've got your inner ear, that Snell-like apparatus right here. Right next door is the balance. And because they're in such close proximity, sometimes when you have problems with hearing, you also have problems with balance. So that's one reason. The other is that the sound, as it bounces around your environment. So as I'm talking right now, or if I'm walking down the hallway, the sounds of my footsteps resonating, reverberating from the walls helps you orientate yourself. And when you don't have hearing loss, you miss out on that reverberation and the resonance. And so you don't have that aid to your balance system. So one of the things that we do in our curriculum is once a week, we suggest some balance exercises for you. And encourage you to start engaging in balance exercise, because in addition to wearing your hearing aids and getting hearing loss treatment, exercise, explicit balance exercises can help begin to prevent those falls?
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
I think we had Sandy who wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I'm very curious about the slide that you had about the auditory memory bank. And I was wondering if there's any way that you could put that up on the screen again. I would love to take a picture and show that to my husband.
Oh, for sure. Let's see if I can pull that off for you. Or you know what? Let's see, share. You know what? Here's a better idea. Why don't I give you my email and I can send you my slides?
That would be wonderful. That would be simpler.
Because I think by the time I figure out,
That's
it's an
okay.
embarrassing thing. I'm a CEO of a tech company and I'm terribly technologically clumsy. But let me give you my email if you all have a pencil. And if somebody has a pencil, you can share it with other members. So feel free, if I don't get to everybody's questions today, I hope I'm talking slowly enough. Be sure you email me because I'm always happy to hear from you all. So it's in as in Nancy, so in Murray, MURRAY at WUSTL, and that's WUSTL. So it stands for Washington University in St. Louis. So WUSTL.edu, education, edu. So in Murray at WUSTL.edu, and I will be happy to send my slides.
Thank you so much. That's perfect.
The next question is from Barbara Johnson.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really interesting. I've heard about auditory training. I've done a little myself when I first got my cochlear implant 10 years ago now, or 11 years ago now. So I'm a bimodal user. I have a cochlear implant and a hearing aid. And I was curious about one of the points that came up in your presentation regarding selective attention. And if I understand that correctly, it's basically the ability to tune out background sounds or sounds that aren't really relevant to speech and communication. One of the things I'd heard, I'd taken a couple of audiology prerequisite classes, so I've done some of the science and it's really interesting. One of the things I heard about that was that if you do not use hearing devices, that your brain can essentially give some feedback to your hearing system to help you with tuning out sounds. However, your cochlear implant and your hearing aid doesn't have that same fantastic ability that your brain does. So I'm wondering how that might play into the auditory rehab, and am I going to be bumping up against a limit that I just can't get past, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? Or is it too much?
That's a complicated question. And I hardly know where to begin. So let me start backwards. Remember my gym analogy where you can get so good and then you kind of plateau with your training, but you keep training to keep you from going back down. In my experience, that's what happens. People kind of maintain their good skills for like 3 to 6 months, which is not bad, but then they start kind of getting rusty. I just had a cochlear implant user today say, I stopped for 6 months and now I'm back. Now I'm already feeling better, that I'm hearing more. Sound localization is very complicated. Your brain does a lot of gymnastics to localize sound. So one thing, if sound is coming, say, from this direction, it hits this ear before it hits that ear, and your brain computes the difference in time of arrival, and uses that to help localize it. Another thing, that's a biggie. I could go on and on, but just think about, sound is coming like this and it hits that ear and then it hits that ear. And that difference in time helps you figure it out. Now with having if you have only, let's say if you're only using your hearing aid, you'd probably completely miss that clue and probably have a really hard time localizing sound because you're probably very severely impaired without your implant in this ear, if not completely. With both of them, it's still not the same as perfect hearing. And the fact that one is an electrical signal and one is a kind of digital, almost analog kind of signal, even though it's digital, makes it even harder for the brain to kind of piece that together. So that is a common phenomenon with somebody who's using the cochlear implant and a hearing aid to still have trouble localizing sound. When I talk about auditory attention, what I really mean is, you know where the sound's coming from, and now you've got to really focus on that talker and be able to kind of ignore that extra sound going on around you. So you can really focus in on the talker and kind of, remember what I said, you kind of orchestrate all your resources for understanding the talker. So all the cognitive resources and the hearing resources goes into attention, even if it's quiet sort of thing. But yeah, that is listening in noise and localizing sound are two of the most common challenges that people experience.
Yeah, I've kind of given up on localization. I've had hearing loss my whole life, so I'm kind of used to asking my husband, "Where's the ambulance?" You know, that kind of thing. So
yeah, and you know, I think it's something that people with normal hearing take for granted, and they have no idea how important it is for many reasons. But one reason is it's very easy to miss the first part of what somebody says because you don't know where it's coming from. And so you miss the first part, and by the time you find the talker, yeah, you can throw in lip reading, that helps you, but you've missed the first part of what's said. And then you've got to kind of, you don't have the context to help you figure out what comes next. And that's something I don't think people with normal hearing appreciate. So.
Thank you,
Good
Barbara.
question.
Thank you. We have just a few questions more. Sarah wanted to know if coaches know about assistive listening devices, including hearing loops and coils.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. That's part of the training they get. A longer answer is, so each group of hearing coaches have an audiologist, you know, an AUD or a PhD audiologist in charge of them. So we have a mechanism to kick upstairs those questions that the hearing coach can't answer, and then the audiologist answers the questions.
She also wanted to know about if there are parts of the brain that become better due to hearing loss.
You know, I don't have a firm answer to that one. We know that children who are born with hearing loss have some visual skills and even olfactory skills. They're sharper than people who are born with regular hearing. And so the idea is that the brain has taken away that part of the visual part and the smell part of the brains have early on taken over that part of the brain, have more resources for vision and smelling. What I can answer you is, if an adult loses their hearing, does their, say, vision get better or their smell? I haven't seen anything that says yes to that, but I haven't seen anything that says no either. So it could be there's some research out there that I just don't know about.
Thank you. We have like 2 questions more.
Okay.
That's okay for you. Paula says that she's trying to think about creative ways to pay for Amplify. If you have heard of employers covering this personal, professional development or via employee assistance program.
Yeah, we are working on that right now, and we're working on that in several ways. One is we're really targeting audiologists in their clinics because we offer kind of package deals to them. So your audiologist can provide it to you as a service. And then we're also working with insurance companies to try to get it covered by employee insurance. So it's a work in progress right now.
Thank you. We have one question from Jackie. She had a question. Jackie?
Yeah, it was not really a question, but a comment, backing Nancy's talk about balance and hearing. Two things. One, I can attest that these balance exercises work, because when I lost, I don't have a vestibular system really anymore. And I've been doing balance training with my PT since last May, and I got better. And then for some reason, after I had my right cochlear, it has nothing to do with the cochlear. It just, my balance system, it's all, as you all know, my history of cancer and radiation that caused my hearing loss. I've had to go under extensive training to retrain your brain with the balance. So the balance exercises do work. You have to be diligent on it. And like she said, you stop doing it, it's going to get worse again. So you constantly have to do these things. And I've, in January, when it was the worst, the balance scale is a 30, and 30 is good. My balance was 8 because of the vestibular stuff. In 10 weeks, and my lying, in 10 weeks, and it could be, I'm doing magnesium infusions to try and clear this dizziness too. In 10 weeks, I went from an 8 to an 18. So these balance exercises work phenomenally. The other thing that Michelle asked Nancy also was about the sound recognition. I'm completely deaf without my cochlear implant. My left cochlear does not work. That's another surgery down the line. But my right cochlear, I have done, and I'm very interested in this app to help me even improve more, because my audiologist through the Cochlear Rep, which is Cochlear, like the Cochlear company, my activation at 1 month after activation, based on the tests and the games and everything that they told me, my recognition went from like not really good to 30%. And in 6 months post cochlear implant activation, I am now at 90% voice recognition. And that's within 6 months. They're like in awe of how well that I can hear. But what, like Nancy said, these things work. Like when she's talking, I'm like, oh my God, yes, these things work. So the biggest thing for voice recognition that my Cochlear Rep and my audiologist have told me are based on, like, to do these games, which like I want this app, because I think that this will help me even more to get to 100%. But reading a book with your audio, like your, I don't know what it's called, the audiology, auditory, whatever that app is that reads books to you.
Yeah.
To get that and read the same book, but follow along with somebody reading to you, that is what I've done for like 6 months. And I can tell you, like, practice. If you don't practice, I've been bad because my hearing's been good. I haven't done it. And I've noticed that my voice recognition to what people are saying, like car and bar, like she said, the voice recognition has gone down. So I need to start doing that again. So I am a person that can attest to what all of these things that Nancy has said has improved my hearing immensely, going from being a full hearing person. Yes, I do have deficits still about the location. They're not as bad with my cochlear as they were with my Baja, but I can attest that everything that she said works, and you have to practice and you have to be diligent at it because these things do work. And I am that model of, I can tell you, balanced exercise, and this voice recognition actually works too. So
I want to make you my poster child.
yeah, I am the
Everything you
poster
just
child.
said
It's kind
is
of weird.
so-
These are
I
all
mean,
rare. Also,
so-
when you just said, when people's vision or hearing goes, that another sense increases, I'm that rare person that I'm blind as a bat. Once I, like, my eyes are so bad, I could hear so well. Before cancer treatment, my audiologist in Detroit said, you have to whisper around you, you're so good. And now I'm like extremely deaf. My smell has increased and my taste has increased. So
Interesting. Interesting.
I'm that rare person that those things do happen to me. Mostly my smell has increased like crazy. It's weird. Like I can smell stuff from like a mile away, like people outside smoking, like 2 blocks, like a block away. I can smell the smoke.
Yeah. Well, you
So,
know,
I'm the rare
everything-
person with that, but I
Yeah.
am the poster child to tell you that everything that she has said, you have to practice and it works.
But you
Because
know, a take-home message in everything you just said is that no matter your age, you have neural plasticity. That if you ensure that you have structured input into your brain can change, whether it's balance or listening or smell or taste. That is an example of the brain being plastic and changing in response to stimulation. So,
and you guys will laugh, but see all those stickers on that door, all the
Yeah.
blue stickers in yellow, those are my balance exercises. So I have to use those to, like, I keep them on the door because I have to stand by something so I don't fall. So I, like, there's like a doorway right there. So if I feel like I'm gonna fall, I can grab it. But that is my reminder every day that I need to do these exercises. It's not aesthetic, but I don't care.
yeah. Well, and
Right.
that's why we incorporated them into the curriculum. And they're very easy exercises. So if you don't have severe balance problems, there are things where during the commercial, watching TV, you can stand up and do them and then sit back down, or while you're waiting for the coffee to brew, you can do some. The idea is that you can kind of incorporate some balance activities where you don't have to say, okay, I got to do this for 10 minutes right now, at the same time every day. So anyway, well, everyone, thank you so very much. It's been my pleasure to be with you today. And you asked some great questions. And I just have very much enjoyed being here. So I wish you all the best. And
Nancy, there are a couple more questions, and would it be okay if people emailed you?
absolutely. So
I
feel
know
free to-
Juliet wanted to say something, and there were a few other people that we just couldn't get to, but thank you so much. You have given us a lot, and I think this really shows me that we definitely need a chapter meeting just devoted to balance issues and the vestibular system. I think that would be great. So thank you so much for your expertise, and good luck with your company.
Well, thank you so much. And you all have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Lovely to have you, Dr. Murray.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. How wonderful. How wonderful. I agree with Sandy. I agree with what everybody said. Balance issues, and Barbara mentioned when she talked about localization of sounds, things I don't even think of that I've sort of just like given up on. So I think it's wonderful she brought so many different subjects into the forefront that I think that was just fantastic. And the questions were as well. We are going to, Tim will be uploading